This is the introduction video from doing the Beckett control conversion on an Aquahot in a 1996 Wonder Lodge. There's a few things that are going to be important to know. The video is going to be pretty choppy, but I'm trying to point out all the little things that you're going to run into. First of all, these are the parts that I ordered from Patriot Supply. That's the burner, the controller, and the coil igniter. Okay, here's something I downloaded off WOG. This will ID your two different thermostats in case you had a question about them. Which one is the control and which one is the high limit? And this is on the DC side. That's a good thing. This came off, I think, the Newell's owner group. This is just a basic explanation on how relays work. So if you're not clear, this is a great thing to have. It explains the whole thing. You have to put two relays in. You might want to go over that. This is the diagram from WOG, Wonder Lodge Owners Group, how they're wiring this thing up. You can download this off the blog there, and then this is the one off the Newell Owners website. And there is a couple of differences in how these things work. On the Newell one, well, let's say on the Wonder Lodge one, you're not supposed to turn the dash switch off while the motor's burning because it immediately shuts it down without a 2-minute purge of the air and the fan blowing to cool the thing down after the burners turn off. So if you turn that off on the dash switch, it's my understanding that it does not do that. So you have to wait until it's up to heat, it turns itself off, then turn it off on the dash. For me, I'm not really into that because I'll be in my RV in the morning and I just want to turn it on and off and hit the road and go somewhere. And I don't want to wait around for it to turn off. So the Newell one overcame that by wiring it a little bit different. So that's the one that I ended up using. It's very similar, but a couple of different ways it's wired from the relays and the thermostat. So you can make your choice. Just, read over them real carefully, trace the diagram, and you'll figure out what the difference is after looking at them both. You make that decision. So we'll go on to the next spot here and I'll start showing you how I put this thing together. But quick snippet of the bracket I'm gonna make. It's a piece of 22 gauge sheet metal from the Home Depot. I'd like to go thicker, but this is easy to bend and the components are not that heavy. So I sketched out the holes, the mounting holes, the holes for the wires, and now I'm using this little brake thing to bend it up. So here's the finished sheet metal contraption. Not my best work, but I don't have a lot of tools anymore. So here it is. That's how it's all gonna mount. So we'll see in a minute. So here's the mounted igniter and controller on that bracket that I made. You need to take this metal bracket off the back of the igniter. It just screws off. Here's my terminal strip I'm gonna use, my two relays. If you flip this over, you're gonna be able to pull this whole thing off the wall and access the fuses, the wiring, and the wiring for the igniter. This is the hot leads for the igniter. They came originally with these weird spring things on there that I guess when this goes into a pressure washer or a Beckett, whatever they make, this presses into something. But if you pull those off, there's a threaded stud, and it's just gonna get an eyelet crimped onto some high voltage wire that I got off of Amazon per recommendation of the Newell Owners Group. Have done this conversion as well. It's supposed to be high voltage silicone wire. Hopefully that will work out fine with the ring terminal hooked on there. So this will all sit outside above the Aquahot, and now onto the hard part, the wiring. So we'll tune back in at that point. Igniter wires, I got some old spark plug boots I had, automotive spark plug boots I had around. Crimped those on, screwed them down. I'm gonna slip these up over the top of that. All right, here's the spark plug boots slipped over there. They're nice and tight. These are actually distributor cap boots. They're not spark plug boots. The igniter has 4 wires, a blue and white stripe and a black ground, and then these 2 yellow wires. If you're controlling the igniter by a control box, it says to cut these wires and cap them off. Don't twist them together, just cap them off individually. And then down here it's labeled igniter. It's kind of hard to see, but igniter ground. So those just come over and wire nut them together, and those are going to sit behind this panel. They're not going down to the terminal strip below where all these other wires will get connected. All right, we're back at this video that's pieced together, but I'm a little further along here. So I have this terminal strip wired on the bench here. So I'm trying to get everything wired as much as I can and just slap it on the wall inside the basement wall there above the Aquahot, and then do the actual connections to the Aquahot itself from the terminal strip. So like I said before, the igniter is pretty much wired directly to the control board, so it's not going to go into the terminal strip. I took 1 wire, which is the alarm wire that's going to a relay. I didn't put that in the terminal strip because my relays are mounted on the front, as you'll see. I went ahead and just numbered all the wires with some numbering tape, and then made a little list that I'll print out on something better to put on the front. So if anybody has to do some work, they'll know what it is. But this way I don't have to look behind this thing when I start wiring it up. So when this flips over, okay, so the terminal strip's gonna mount on the wall. This is gonna mount on the wall. I have both my relays here, and I have them labeled for main power relay and the dash light relay. So that is number 0 wire. Instead of putting it down to this extra terminal strip, I just went ahead and rounded it right up to this relay. So this whole thing should mount in. I'm gonna run all the grounds, or this black wire, and I'm running those all, home running those to the main ground on the chassis of the Aquahot inside the box enclosure. So I just left those a little bit long, and we'll be able to wire that up. That's a ground for 2 on this relay and 1 on this relay. There's going to be a ground, so that's that. Obviously, all these components have their own ground. The motor has its own ground. The main power has its own ground. The fuel valve has its own ground. All those are going to be home run back to the Aquahot main thing, as opposed to just splicing them all together down the road. So that's where we're at right now. Obviously, these are the ignition wires. So hopefully we'll get this in here and you can see what I'm gonna do. You know, my workbench is pretty sloppy. All these forms I downloaded off the Wonder Lodge Owners Group under this Beckett Aquahot redo. I got some other stuff off the Newell Owners Group. They're very similar, and hopefully this will all work out. All right, this involves the CAD cell, the original CAD cell in my Aquahot mounts right here. This is face up the disc. That photo cell costs I think 225 bucks. So it's pretty expensive when it goes bad. And when you buy these Beckett control and the ignition, the igniter, it comes with 1 each. So you get like 2 of them. Okay, they unplug, the tip unplugs. You know, that's the photo cell. It's very similar. It's just basically on off, you know, when it sees flame. Goes into this bracket, and then, you know, comes with a pigtail wire on it. So my goal, these things are like 25 bucks when they go bad. My goal is this is one of the best conversions, because 25 bucks compared to 250, and you get one with each of them. So you have 2, you're already going to have an extra. There has not been a lot of pictures of people doing this on the Newell Owners Group or Wonder Lodge, but people on the Newell Owners Group said they have zip tied it in there and it works. So I'm not going to zip tie mine. So this is what I did. It's nice because I have the original. This is how it comes. This is the bracket. I had to take the actual photocell and cut the end off. I got a lathe, so it was easy just to part that off. I took about 1/8 of an inch off. You can see here's an original one. You can see kind of about how much I took off. But I mean, you could do it with a grinder or something else. And yeah, that's it. Then I took the bracket and I straightened it out somewhat as I could out of the original little plastic socket. So now I'm gonna bend this, because this tab on the end, that tapered tab, fits right into this slot perfectly that's punched into this plate. So I'm gonna get it centered in there and then figure out a way to connect it from there. So we'll go into that in a minute. All right, video 2 on the CAD cell. Went through a couple of different scenarios of how this was gonna go on. None of it really worked out, but I'm on a final version here. So here's your flame disc with the CAD cell removed. Obviously it's out of the Aquahot. It has a stamping in here that I had to grind off. It was stamped downward, so I kind of ground that smooth. And your CAD cell that comes with the Beckett burner, like I said, there's 2 of them. You get one with the igniter and one with the control box. So you get 2 free CAD cells as opposed to spending $200 or more on a Aquahot one. I'm really gonna try to retrofit this and make it work so we can just use these little plug-in $25 things. So I did have to cut this down to 1/2 inch deep in length here. It came maybe 5/8. I put it in a lathe and just parted the end off it. If you don't have a lathe, you could probably just cut it with a cutoff wheel and file it smooth, but this is down to about 1/2 an inch. So the bracket comes with a bend on it from Beckett. I put it on an anvil, flattened it out straight, and then I had to weld this washer on the end, grind it smooth, taper it down, and that's gonna go through. There's an existing slot here that it fits perfectly in. So let me put this together and I'll show you another view. All right, so now I bent it flat up like that and a little bit offset. It's not straight, so it's kind of shifted to one side to make it sit flat on the bottom of the plate there. All right, there it is. So it's slipped up through that hole. I plugged the CAD cell into this socket piece here and screwed it in, and there is the CAD cell. So there is a little gap here. I think I don't think it's gonna be a problem with air coming through there. There's a pretty big gap around the electrodes, so I don't think this thing needs to be airtight. But if it does, I'm gonna go ahead and put a piece of foil tape or something. I might do that anyway. Some high heat foil tape. So that's where we're at. It's got the pigtail on there. So now, if that ever goes out, I could just take my next one that I got and just plug it right in. So there you have it. We'll go put it in the actual burner. Here's an electrode. Another tip here is when you pull these out to get the wires off, one came off real easy, one was stuck, and I had a real hard time getting it off, and it actually broke the part inside the boot. So there's a little sleeve that this snaps onto, and then it has a welded screw in there, and you just literally screw this into the end of the wire, your new wire. So what I would do is, if I was getting rid of the old igniter, is just when you open the top of your Aquahot, just cut those 2 lead wires to this, pull your electrodes out, or unscrew the last little bit of wire that you had on here so you don't damage that little threaded thing, because mine snapped off. This is what came out of the other boot, and the little threaded part snapped off. And I saw you could get them on an Aquahot supply house, but it's like one boot's like 30 bucks, so that's kind of a bummer, and I don't think I could weld that back on there. This clip the snap clip was really deformed, so it didn't want to, see how it's so deep pushed in there, it really did not want to pull off like the other one did. I don't even think this other one has a clip in it if I'm looking down in there. So cut the wire, pull the coil out, the igniter, and then just carefully unthread that last little bit of wire and then try to work these things off. So here's the CAD cell. It shares a ground with the fuel solenoid, so we got to run this 2 wires all the way back up to the control box. So I'm just going to take this wire off here and pull this whole thing out and put the other flame sensor in. So there it is installed. It still has a lot of nice free play in it, so it can seal up on the surface of the chamber there. I got the electrode adjuster tool on there, so I just tighten those electrodes down. I may throw a tiny piece of tie wire from these to this fuel line, but I don't think it really needs it. It's in there pretty solid. You can see the CAD cell right there. Now, on to some wiring. So here I am out at the bus. These were the 2 wires that went to the igniter that we took off of here. I just taped those up because I didn't want to split this open and deal with that and replace the wires. So these 3 wires headed down into the case here. The red and black are the power for the motor. The yellow went to the igniter. So I grouped those all together. I just folded the yellow wire over and tucked it in that sleeve. It's temporarily zip tied here, so we come up and we have our new CAD cell fuel solenoid wires. So that's all done except for the high voltage leads, which I have to get new boots for because I broke a boot. So we'll look at that in a little while. And up here, I have almost all my terminal strips filled. I got 3 more spaces left. Number 2 and number 4. So the enable is gonna get hooked somewhere, and the main power and ground are going in there. This is the Beckett Aquahot controller conversion. I'm gonna have a long video on this, but this is kind of the final stages. I just wanted to get some things out of the way before I button it up. Here's the new high tension ignition cables coming up from the igniter. These were purchased, silicone ignition wires were purchased off Amazon. I had to get 1 new boot because I broke the threaded screw-in end in the other one. There's little clips in here. I would advise taking the clips out. The one that I broke was the one with the clip in it. When I took it apart, the clip was not in there. It holds the boot on there on the metal electrode on the bottom, but it's literally impossible to get on and off. So I'm just doing that. There's your Beckett CAD cell that I have mounted. I put a new nozzle on here. And the other thing is all the wires, which was kind of unexplained in the write-ups and the wiring diagrams. It's hard to figure out, but basically any wire that went into these 2 plugs into your control box, the silver control box is gone. So all those wires go away. Okay, some of the wires just get discarded. You know, there's some thin wires that just got discarded. So the other unclear thing in the write-up is obviously you have your terminal strip coming down from all your new controller wires, your new igniter coming down, and the wires, some of them in there as well. But on the actual Aquahot factory wiring, these are the only 4 wires you're taking off. Those went to that plug I just showed you. Your new wires are going in, and this is a jumper. It's in the wiring diagrams. These are the only 4 wires. All the rest of your wires are factory. They're going to stay the same. Down below, you're taking a wire and jumping it onto this and this fuse block to get power. It's a 10 amp fuse and a 15 amp fuse. I have the fuses pulled out. Okay, there was a couple of wires on here that went into the BNC plug to the burner. Those get tossed. So your new connections are here and here on the fuse block, and these 4 screws on the bottom. That was kind of the big confusion for me, where was all this stuff going? All this stuff remains the same. All this stuff remains the same. So here's my new loom of wires coming from the burner, the CAD cell, the fuel solenoid, and they're all routing up into that terminal strip. And I'm gonna cover them up in some wire loom, and I'm gonna do these separately. I'm gonna break these ignition wires apart on the run of it. I just don't like running those in one boot. So one other thing is, with the Beckett controller, the way I hooked it up off the Newell Group wiring diagram, the purge function works, and all that stuff works when you just turn the dash switch off, when you're just inside and you don't want it on anymore. You don't have to go outside and do anything, you just turn it off. But on the one diagram, the purge cycle doesn't work when you turn the power off to the controller. So you have to come out and also disconnect the main power to the controller if you ever have an error. You got to disconnect the power for 10 seconds. You got to unscrew a lug, pull the wire off. Another concern was, I don't want 12 volts running to this all the time when I'm not in my RV, it's stored, or is that going to wear the controller out with 12 volts going into it constantly? So they recommended, I got this 40 amp remote control breaker. Has a key fob remote I can just hang in here or keep inside. So if I ever have to disconnect it to reset the controller, I can just hit this key fob and it'll cut the power off, then I can turn it back on. It has an LED indicator light when it's on. And then when I just have my RV parked for a month or two at my house, I can just turn it off. There's a lot of switches I turn off when I park it anyway, so I'll just have to come in and turn the Aquahot on. Just be very careful, go over your wiring 4 or 5 times. I had the relays wired wrong. I never fired the thing up, but after I, second check, third checked, they're upside down, the pin numbers are hard to read, and you can get carried away and hook them up wrong. So I'll give you the close-ups of the rest of the install in the rest of the video for other little parts that are concerning when you're trying to figure this out. Another wiring mystery from the diagram is your 4 thermostats are behind this cover. The 190 control thermostat and the high temp shut-off thermostat. All those wires run through this black silicone housing. The 2 on this side are AC heat for the shore power, so you don't need to mess with those. But the 4 wires, 2 for each, run up through here, and they used to plug in to multiple places down here. You just disconnect those all and just run that sleeve up through here, and those wires reconnect, some to the relay, some to the terminal block per the wiring diagram. But you don't need to disconnect or hook any wires up behind this panel. You just hook them up from the end of this snake that's already factory on there. All right, another Aquahot part of this video. I took the whole burner out because it was not sucking fuel after the whole Beckett wiring and all that. I couldn't get it to run, and I could not get the fuel pump to prime. Went through a bunch of different things with the fuel filter and different stuff, and suggestions from the WOG said, hey, take a look at your motor, your bearings, and they wanted me to look at this little clutch disc, 2 little plastic pieces that put the motor into the fan. They're in good condition. I took the motor off, ran it, runs really smooth. The bearings in the fan are really smooth, but the telltale sign was I wasn't getting any air out of this hole, very little bit, because the fan was running backwards. Therefore, the fuel pump was running backwards, so it wasn't sucking fuel in. So that's something you should remember. The problematic thing here is the Beckett controller has a positive and negative for the motor. Red should be positive, black should be negative. So that's how I hooked it up. Turns out these need to be flipped. or at least on yours, make sure your motor is spinning in the proper direction to blow air out the front. But these need to be switched. So my Beckett controller ground is gonna go to hot, and my Beckett controller hot is gonna go to ground. It's a DC motor, it can go both ways when you reverse polarity. Other thing is, the wires that run down inside the box are probably 12 gauge, if that, maybe even, excuse me, not 12. They're probably like 16, maybe even thinner. So I ran all my wiring with 14 gauge wire everywhere. So I'm gonna go ahead and junk this harness and just run 2 new 14 gauge wires right out of the motor, up out of the case, and put a quick disconnect on them. So when I wanna pull this thing out, I can just unplug those 2 wires, disconnect the 2 fuel lines, and then pull the thing out. But that's what it looks like inside. The motor is super small, thought it was a lot bigger. That's the front of it. So we'll put it back together and put it back in. This is my case minus the coil. The nice thing, when I took this case off, I could pull the wires to the coil out and cut them off, so I'm not gonna have those hanging out of there anymore. But simple as that. You undo the 4 exterior screws and you just knock it with a rubber mallet on here, and it'll slowly come off that plastic housing. There's an O-ring in there that's holding it on. All right, we have success after the fuel pump reversal of the fan. Here it is. Really clean down here without the coil and the control box. A little dirtier up here, but that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap all these wires with some this stuff. I'm gonna do the ignition wires separately, run one around each other so they're not laying together for that long of a run, and clean it up, put the cover on. But no smoke, burning clean. That's what you're gonna look forward to in your project. But we all know how that goes.